Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 25 of my Steins Gate Zero Let's Play. Last episode, Maho has returned from the US and is secretly helping Daru create the phone wave to try and save Kirisu, but they were found out by Okabe. The three of them got into an argument, a disagreement about things, but Okabe seems to be wavering a little bit when Maho hit him with the you sound like me, you're saying that it's impossible, but like I can tell in your face that part of you thinks that this can be done. But before they could settle all that, it turns out that Mayuri overheard Okabe talking to Maho about how, like, the timelines and that Mayuri was saved at Kirisu's expense and she ran off. And no good can come of that. I remember the last time she ran off when Maho told her that things went very badly. So it left a little bit of a cliffhanger. So we're going to continue on and see what happened. I assume that Okabe is going to try and chase after Mayuri and talk to her about things. So yeah, let's jump into it. Let's see what happens next. The summer solstice had passed, and by 6 p.m., the sun was finally setting behind the city skyline. Part of the sky was still red and the rest a dirty blue. For the past few days, Suzuha had worked on the time machine on top of the radio building. It was almost time for her to go back to the past, which meant she was putting a lot more effort into the maintenance work. Parts which could normally get dirty with no trouble had been polished to a sparkling shine. She finished her work, put her tools back in the box, and stored the box in the time machine's cockpit. Then she sat down in the control seat and took another look at the battery gauge. With the amount of fuel she had left, in less than a month she wouldn't be able to go back to July 27th, 2010. She had to leave this era before that time limit passed her by. The original plan of taking Rintaro to the past looked like it was going to fail. That meant she would have to go on the mission that she'd spent the last year coming up with all by herself. And we still have, and we still have Kagari still going to be coming after her to try and stop her from doing this. She chuckled to herself and stuck her hand deep into the computer core. Inside was an external hard drive that clearly belonged to 2011, not 2036. Rintaro had probably put it here when her back was turned. One of the secondary touch panel monitors was displaying a warning that read, "Foreign object detected in cockpit." These machines were capable of breaking through early 21st century camouflage in less than a second. It was clear from the way the fake wires were laid out that monitoring and data retrieval were not its objectives. He'd probably hidden it here because he didn't want anyone to find it. Maybe she should just pretend she didn't see it and leave it here until she was just about to leave. As she pondered the best course of action, she heard the heavy door outside opening. Oh boy, is that Kagari? Someone was here. Suzuha pulled her gun from its holster and looked out from the cockpit toward the iron door that led into the building. She still remembered what happened with Kagari the other day. It couldn't hurt to be careful, but when she saw who it was, she relaxed. Oh no! Mayuri! Oh, she's gonna want to go to the past. No, Mayuri. No, Mayuri, she's gonna be like, I need to go back, and she's gonna sacrifice herself, and Okabe's gonna, maybe that's gonna be the wake-up call for him, right? This is the second last route. The last one is the true ending, so maybe Mayuri offering to go back and, like, go to the Alpha World line, or was it the Beta World line? You think I know by now. I believe it's the Alpha World line, the one where she died. And then Okabe will finally be like, okay, fine, I will go with, Suzuha this time. I will go. I'll try and fix things. She put her gun away and jumped out of the cockpit to welcome her.
Suzu-san. Oh? 泣いてるの? 何があった?
Suzuha had no idea why the always smiling Mayuri would be crying.
どうして みんなは教えてくれなかったのかな。え？クリスさんっていう人と マユシーとの本当のこと、教えてくれなかったのかな。
She almost spoke but quickly cut herself off. How did she hear? From whom? The cruel truth that Mayuri's survival depended on Kirisu Makise's death. There was nothing in the world Suzuha had wanted to see less than the look on Mayuri's face when she discovered that.
誰に聞いたの？
But there was only a few people who knew the truth, excluding herself, only Rintaro, Itaru, Ferris, and Maho. And none of them would deliberately tell her. In fact, they'd all hidden it for her sake.
オカリンとマホさんが話しているのを聞いちゃった。
Then it was an accident after all.
ねえ、すずさん、お話聞いてもいい？ 2036年のマユシーとオカリンのこと。
Suzuha wasn't sure what to say. To be honest, she didn't want to say anything at all. It wasn't something that would make her feel better.
未来のことは知らない方が幸せだよ。
Another line of tears spilled down Mayuri's cheek.
マユシーなんてね、この世界にいても何の役にも立たないよ。だったらクリスさんの方が世界のためにもオカリンのためにもずっと必要なんだよ。
Suzuha suddenly felt like she was looking at the Mayuri she'd known in the future. She thought of the big sis Mayu that she'd big sis Mayu that she'd seen ever since she was a little girl, and she couldn't refuse her request.
私の知ってる未来のマユ姉さんも時々そう言ってた。そんな時は決まってぼんやりと空を眺めてるんだ。すごく寂しそうで切なそうだったよ。私もかがりもマユ姉さんのそんな顔を見るのがつらかった。かがり？
It was only then she remembered that she'd been keeping Kagari a secret from Mayuri.
かがりっていう名前の女の子がいたんだ。繊細孤児でさ、マユ姉さんが引き取ったんだ。だからマユ姉さんの娘っていうことになる。
Okay, so Mayuri doesn't know that Kagari obviously was the one who attacked them when they stormed the lab on New Year's Eve. So I'm betting maybe Kagari is gonna come up here to try and stop Suzuha, but Mayuri will be here and maybe she'll be able to convince Kagari to like stand down.
マユシーの娘。優しくてでも強い子でね。まだこんなに小さいうちからいつも言ってた。ママを守るのは自分だって。そんな子だったから母親であるマユ姉さんが寂しそうにしてるのはかなり答えてたはず。そういえば7月7日、今日って七夕って言うんだってね。うん。私は子供の頃にマユ姉さんから教わったんだ。織姫と彦星が年に一度会うことができる日だって。大気汚染がひどくて星なんて見えない時代だったけど、マユ姉さんは言ってたよ。雲が夜空を覆っていても、星は世界から消えちゃうわけじゃない。雲の向こうで変わらずに輝き続けてるの。だから一緒にお祈りしようね。 そんなまゆ姉さんの言葉が私やかがりには希望になったんだ。それだけは知っておいてほしい。少なくとも私やかがりにとってはまゆ姉さんが必要だった。それにオカリンおじさんだって死ぬまでまゆ姉さんのことを大事にしてたんだ。まゆ姉さんの幸せのことばかり考えていたんだ。
Yeah, so in this timeline, they don't know about the truth of Rintaro and how he was actually alive.
死ぬまで。あ、
Maybe that was another cruel truth for her, but Suzuha decided she'd hold nothing back now.
そうだよ。オカリンおじさんは今から15年後までしか生きられない。まゆ姉さんをかばって死ぬんだ。嘘。
Maybe this is just gonna push her even more, like, if I go back in time, if I die, then he won't have to worry about protecting me and then maybe he'll live.
オカリンおじさんは最後にこう言ってたって父さんに後から聞いた。まゆりの命を助けることができて本当に良かった。自分はまゆりを守るために生きてきたんだから。そんな。
I don't think that's gonna make her feel better. Mairi put both her hands over her mouth.
でもまゆ姉さんはそのことをずっと引きずっていたんだろうな。私たちには見えないところでこっそり七夕の空を見上げてつぶやいてた。
あの日、私の彦星様が復活していたら、すべてが変わっていたのかな。あの日、私の彦星様、私の。
Mairi was repeating the words to herself. The tears were still pouring down her face, but her sad cries finally came to a stop. She was shaking, but her voice had gotten quiet.
どういうことなのかな。
私今ならわかる気がする。1年前私オカリンおじさんの態度に本気でムカついたんだ。チャンスが目の前にあるのになんで諦めるんだって。そんなオカリンおじさんをかばって甘やかしてるまゆ姉さんのことも本当は許せなかったんだよね。でもさ、この1年ここで暮らしてみて感じたんだ。あの時間違ってたのは私の方だったって。今ならあの日のオカリンおじさんともっとちゃんと話せるかもしれない。
あの日。
それでうまく説得できるかどうかそこまでは自信ないんだけどね。
As the sun set in the west, the shadow of the time machine lengthened and Suzuha's along with it.
私に残されたチャンスはあと一度だけ。それなら未来のまゆ姉さんの言葉にかけてみようと思う。マキセ・クリスが殺された日じゃなく、まゆ姉さんの言ってたあの日へ飛んでまゆ姉さんの望みを叶えられるかどうか試してみる。
Okay, I'm curious about this.
望み。
Suzuha gently rubbed Mairi's tiny little shoulders.
それがシュタインズゲートへ向かう鍵だって信じてみる。シュタインズゲートを開くことができるのは彦星をやめちゃった普通の星じゃなくって、まゆ姉さんの彦星しかいないような気がするからさ。つまり私が新たに考案したミッションは 彦星の復活。父さん流に言うなら、オペレーションアルタイルとか、オペレーションアークライトとか、それともアルタイルとアークライトを結ぶって意味でオペレーションデネブかな。父さんほどのセンスは私にはないみたいだ。
Mayuri tried to draw herself up as best as she could on wobbling legs.
ねえ、すずさん。そのオペレーション、マユシーにやらせて。
I knew it. I knew she was going to do that. Suzuha stared at the girl in front of her, unable to believe what she just heard.
これは危険な賭けだ。私の考えが間違ってて失敗するだけかもしれない。タイムマシンにも限界が来てて、いつ制御不能になるかわからない。そのまま消滅してしまうかもしれない。
それでもお願い。マユシーだってラボメンなんだよ。オカリンとダル君に助けてもらってばっかりなのはまあ嫌だよ。
Mayuri rubbed her eyes hard and wiped away her tears. Life was slowly, slowly returning to her frail body.
マユシーね、オカリンのことが好き。
I mean, I think we knew that.
多分クリスさんと同じぐらい。違う、絶対にクリスさんに負けないくらいずっとずっと大好き。けど私は法院京馬がもっともっと大好きなの。私がおばあちゃんを亡くしてこの世界から消えてなくなっちゃいそうになってた時、そんな私に向かってこの世界にずっといろって言って救ってくれたの。それが彼なの。私の彦星様なの。私ね、もう一度彼に会いたい。あの偉そうな高笑いをまた聞きたい。たとえ私が織姫様になれないって分かってても、
Aww.
それでも私にとっての彦星様はこれまでもこれからもずっとずっと彼以外にはいないんだもん。
It's just so sad, just like this unrequited love. I mean, I think he loves her in a way, but I don't know if he loves her the same way she loves him. But just the fact that she can love him so much, but still understand that Kirisu is the one that he loves romantically, and she's okay with that and willing to bring her back. Like, she's just so unproblematic. We love her.
法院京馬に会いたいよ。
The girl who could never be Orihime shouted all of her feelings to the world at the top of her lungs. And right in that instant, Suzuha heard a sound from her cell phone that she'd never heard before.
これは。
It was the sound of a video message. When she saw the sender and subject, Suzuha gasped. Is it, what's her face?
こ
Kagari?
れ
Oh,
未来からのムービーメール。
oh, Titer, right? Barrel Titer? She got the message! I stuck my hand against the wall of the Brawn Tube workshop to catch my breath. There was no sign of Mayuri. I'd gone to May Queen Yan Yan and to any shop I could imagine her visiting and had no luck. Maho came back. She was out of breath too. Scientists aren't exactly known for their physical stamina.
ダメ。 たりをぐるって回ってみたけど見当たらないわ。
A panic was threatening to make me lose control. Where did you go, Myri?
誰見つかったか
I'd asked Daru to stay behind and call all of her friends and people she knew.
オカリン、それが
どうした？
電話つながらないんだよ。
マユリなら俺も何度もかけてみたが電源を切ってるみたいで。
違うんだ。マユシだけじゃなくて他のどこにもつながらない。
Oh, interesting. So nobody's phone is working, but yet Suzuha got a message from the future. Is that related?
つうかずっとスマホが圏外になったままでさ。
Interesting.
なんだって？
I took out my own
俺
phone.
のも圏外だ。
私もだわ。
The lab had never suffered from bad signal before. We went up to the roof and even tried holding our phones up to the sky, but the result was the same.
屋上でもダメだ。
外に出てもつながらないわ。
Oh, I wonder if there's going to be like a war happening and like somebody shut down, like destroyed a cell phone tower or like shut down the signal somehow. Daru looked for news on the internet. Thankfully, the internet connection was still active.
お、速報出た。
Whenever July kicks around, things tend to go bad. There was an article on the top page of Taboo talking about a large-scale cell phone service outage.
つうか、なんぞこれ。秋葉原一帯の基地局が全キャリア故障？
Yeah, something sus there.
そんなことありえるの？
And just in Akihabara, huh? That's where the war broke out. Yeah, it didn't seem possible to me, not under normal circumstances anyway. The events of a year ago and the Alpha Worldline flashed through my mind. That night when Myri was mercilessly killed and all the safety I'd ever believed in was stripped away. That night when all the pain began started with a bomb threat at Akihabara Station that shut down the train system.
人為的な工作。
Something terrible was about to engulf Akihabara. That was the feeling I had. I tried my best to fight off the flashback. Now wasn't a time to be scared. I needed to find Myri. I couldn't leave her alone out there. I gritted my teeth to fight off the trauma I was carrying and raised my head.
誰？ネットは生きてるんだよな。
あ、うん。だから LINE 経由でルカシやアマネシとは連絡取り合ってる。
Okay, then they should be willing to help look for
俺
Myri.
ももう一度辺りを探してくる。
待った。実はもう一つ気になることが。電波障害のことをアットちゃんで調べようとしたらさ、現在進行形でお買い手がクラックされてて、そのクラッキングしてるやつがさ、ほら。
Ooh, it's not Kirisu, is it? It couldn't be. Or is it John Titer? Okay, let's go to tips. Cracking, a term used to describe actions such as illegally accessing a network-linked computer or modifying its data, often confused with hacking, but originally hacking was described as using and investigating a piece of software. Cracking, however, refers to a malicious, unauthorized activity. Most times when the term hacking is used by the media, this is what they actually mean. Daru brought up the @channel page on his screen for me to see. I wondered why it could possibly matter, but decided to take a look anyway. Oh, Salieri's neighbor, Okay, that's... yeah, okay. Salieri... Why am I having such a hard time with that? Salieri's neighbor. That was the nickname I'd used to make contact with Kuri Gohan and Kamehameha.
なんなの？
I decided to leave the explanation for later and clicked on the thread. It was all comments by a single person. Whoa. Wish I'd been able to read that thing up at the top. Okay, let's get there.
栗ご飯とカメハメハ。
To Salieri's neighbor, it appears that we twins will now be temporarily driven from the place where we belong, so I may not be able to come back here anymore. Our Father in heaven has developed a way to force open our most secret places. Now we shall become good children, his children who cannot tell lies. Thus we will be forced to tell him of the secrets of controlling time. where those secrets lie. It is a great sorrow to me I cannot protect those secrets. I'd hoped we could be good friends, but this is probably goodbye. So lastly, I'd like you to pass a message to the person I respect the most. Okay, I can't quite see what it says at the bottom. The first comment had gone up an hour ago. After that, it was just an endless string of meaningless numbers and letters. Oh, it's probably something in regard to Maho. Because it's something about, I think it said something about Amadeus. What is that supposed to... Wait, okay. Maho was looking at the screen from the side and evidently sensed something was amiss from the text. I answered her.
Amadeus だ。
え？
こいつはアマデウスのクリスなんだよ。クリスに何かがあった。
This was some kind of message. She was trying to contact me with it.
時を司る秘密。
タイムマシンじゃね？
タイムマシンの情報が誰かに漏れたのか。
And thus the war has started.
なんでアマデウスがタイムマシンの情報知ってんの？オカリン喋ったん？
Did I? I didn't think I told her when I was a tester, but there was no time to think about that now.
ヒヤジョさん、アマデウスにアクセスできるか？
規則違反になるけど、そんなこと言ってる場合じゃなさそうね。橋田さん、その PC 借りていい？
Maho took Daro's seat and used his PC to access the Brain Science Institute's computers. And she's probably locked out. She put in her ID, Salieri, and her password. She pushed the enter key, but Amadeus didn't appear.
いつもと違うわ。どういうこと？
Confused, she typed a series of commands into the PC with a speed that rivaled Daru's. But no matter what she did, the Amadeus program didn't appear on her screen. When she'd finished accessing every server at the Institute, she stared at the computer and bit her lip.
そんな、こんなバカなことって。
どうした？
ないの。アマデウスのプログラムが、記憶データごと、どこにも存在していない。
I bet that was, well, it's usually going to be either Judy or it's going to be Dr. Leskinen. Or it could be someone completely different. Just like the message from Kuri Gohan and Kamehameha.
誰？ハッキングしろ！脳科学研究所だけじゃなく、ビクトル・コンドリア大学にあるデータを全部こじ開けてくれ。サーバーから個人の PC まで全部だ。
オキドキ。
ヒヤジョさんも協力してくれ。頼む。
ええ。
But the answer was the same. Not only the Amadeus Kirisu, but the Maho as well were nowhere to be found on the Victor Condria servers. There was no trace of them. Their very existence had been erased.
どこか別の場所に移されたとか？
そんなの無理だわ。アマデウスシステムに関して、そんな管理者権限を持ってるのはレスキネン教授だけよ。
Yeah, right? Exactly.
レスキネン教授。
So he's the bad guy again. But I think this was the similar timeline to the first one we had, like that whole encounter at Daru's like secret hideouts, except we made a different decision. My mind flashed back to the message from Kuri Gohan and Kamehameha. Our Father in Heaven has developed a way to force open. Yeah, our Father, right? That's Dr. Leskinen. Who was this Our Father in Heaven whom Kirisu had spoken of? If Amadeus considered anyone a father, it would be... And thus we'll be forced to tell him secrets.
まさかレスキネン教授が。
憶測で物を言わないで。それよりも教授の ID とパスがクラックされたと考える方がよっぽど現実的よ。
レスキネン教授に連絡をつける方法はあるか？
The phones weren't working, and there was no way to tell when he'd see an email or if he'd respond. Maho was thinking hard, but it didn't seem like she was having any luck. We were getting nowhere. I was concerned about Mairi, but I couldn't ignore the danger that was right in front of me.
とりあえずラジカンへ行ってくる。クリスの警告通りなら狙われるのはあそこだ。
僕も行く。
お前とヒヤジョさんはここで情報収集だ。マユリが戻ってくるかもしれないから。ただし何かあったらすぐに逃げろよ。
I gave my orders and ran out of the lab towards the radio building. Suzuha hit the play button on her smartphone's video display. The video was heavily compressed and covered in static, but she recognized the person that appeared. It was a face she'd known her whole life, a face that had been with her both in her past and her present. The man who she still remembered holding her up in the air as a child was probably about 35 in the video.
やあ、鈴葉。
あ
元気かい？父さんだよ。こちらは2025年だ。いろいろなことを君に託してしまって本当に申し訳なく思う。許してくれ。頼む。このムービーメールが届いたということは、君は、いや、君とマユシはシュタインズゲートへの道をまた一つ見つけてくれたということだ。つまり計画は次の段階に移行したわけさ。なぜ最初から全部指示しなかったのかと君は怒るかもしれないな。でも指示しなかったんじゃないんだ。できなかったんだよ。君が出発した世界線の僕はこれから話すオペレーションを計画していなかったはずだからね。もう気づいているかもしれないが、君とマユシの選択によって世界線はまた少し変動
Oh
した
shit.
んだ。
As soon as they said out loud that Mayuri was going to be the one to like go back and then Suzuha said the thing about like I think I figured out how I can convince you know basically the code, the thing that Mayuri said going back to that day. So that was the moment right there that this message has been sent. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there.
つまり僕も君が出発した世界線とは違う別の世界線上の橋田至るということになる。でも鈴葉、どうか勘違いしないでほしいんだ。僕はどんな世界線においても娘ラブだからね。ちなみにどうだい？比べてみてどっちのパパの方がダンディーかな。僕は最近筋トレを始めたんだけどさ。ふふん。
誰？くだらないこと言ってないで、さっさと作戦内容を話せ。
まったくだわ。どうせまた三日坊主で終わるんだから、どうでもいい報告はしないで。録画できる時間が終わっちゃうにゃん。
まあまあ、そうせかすなって。つうことで、このムービーメールの本来の目的に移ろう。オペレーションアークライトの詳細を伝える。これは本当に一瞬のミスも許されないギリギリの戦いになる。心して聞くんだ。いいね。
And then he runs out of recording because he wanted to talk about his weightlifting. Suzuha paused the video. If he was telling her to pay attention, it must be important. If she was going to memorize it all, she needed to calm down. To be honest, getting a video from her dad in 2025 made her really excited. It felt like her father was telling her the plan she'd come up with on her own was the right one, and she even came up with the name of the operation. That's why she needed to pay careful attention. Mayuri was standing by herself, typing something into her phone as fast as she could. When the video had arrived, she told Mayuri they may have to leave for the past today. There must have been some reason the video was sent today, at this time. That's how it seemed to Suzuha.
何してるの？
あ、すずさん。どう？今日出発することになりそう？
作戦概要はこれから確認するつもり。
そっか。あのね、もし今日出発するってなったら
Oh, is she trying to send a message to
マユシーは行方不
Okabe?
明になっちゃうわけでしょ？心配かけたくないから、お父さんとお母さんと、あとお友達みんなにメールを書いておこうと思って。
オカリンおじさんくらいには直接伝えられる時間があればいいけどね。
She would be done going over the mission and deciding on a course of action by sunset, probably. I mean, unless we get people coming in to try and interfere, which I feel like could happen.
オカリンにもメール書いたから大丈夫。
メールでいいの？
Mayuri smiled and nodded. There was no more tears in her eyes, but you could still see wet lines drawn down her soft pink cheeks.
なんだか恥ずかしいから。でもね、せっかく書いたメールだけど送れないかもしれないなーって今ちょっと困ってたところなのです。
I wonder if she's gonna like leave her phone behind because she can't send the message because there's no signal. So maybe her and Suzuha will get in the time machine. Okabe's gonna come up to the roof, see see what she wrote. Maybe she's saying something about how she loves him.
なんで？
電波圏外になってるんだ。場所が悪いのかな。
県外？
Suzuha looked at the screen on Mairi's phone. There wasn't a single bar on the antenna.
おかしい。この場所ならいつだって電波は入ってた。
Suzuha took out her own phone to double check.
私のもだ。
When she saw that Mairi was using a different cell carrier than her, she frowned.
嫌な予感がする。
Then hurry up and read. You gotta get the rest of the message out. You gotta listen to that message. You gotta go. She told Mairi to hide behind the time machine and silently moved up against the iron door leading to the stairs. She opened it a crack, taking care not to let it creak. She looked inside the building. It was as quiet as ever. There was nothing on the floor below but a room for events and some storerooms. So on weekdays like this, it was always quiet.
気のせいか。
She tilted her head sideways as she softly tried to close the door. Oh no. Oh, god damn it. At Mairi's scream, she turned around just in time to see armed agents in camouflage jumping over the fence. One of them had grabbed Mairi.
外壁をよじ登ってきたのか。
Suzuha deeply regretted her mistake. She was well aware someone could try to come up the walls, but the video from her dad had made her so excited she'd lowered her guard. There were about 30 men all carrying small assault rifles. With Mairi as their hostage, Suzuha couldn't do anything.
銃を置いてそのまま地面に伏せろ。手は頭の上だ。
One of the men gave her an order in a cold voice.
抵抗すればこの女の命は保証できない。
He pulled Mairi close and put the gun to her head, then flipped off the safety.
くっそー。
She had no choice but to obey. Suzuha took the gun out of her holster and put it on the ground, then took a pose where she couldn't resist.
喋らないで。こいつらいざとなれば本気で姉さんを殺すよ。私は大丈夫だから。
From the way they moved, she could easily tell they were veteran professionals. That meant they were certainly after the time machine, and probably well aware that only Suzuha could operate it. That, Suzuha decided, meant they wouldn't kill her if they didn't have to. The man who'd spoke to her first, who was probably the leader, knelt down next to her. She was searched roughly to make sure she wasn't carrying any other weapons.
これでも一応女なんだ。少しは気を使えよ。
They took the other small pistol she carried for emergencies, as well as several different kinds of knives.
目標2と目標3確保。そっちは
The leader spoke to the group of men gathering around the time machine.
目標1確保。ロックがかかっていて全てエラーで弾かれます。
Several of the men had gone inside the machine as well. Leaving the hatch open had been Suzuha's mistake, but still it upset her to see them inside the machine.
何をしても無駄だ。そいつは私じゃないと言うことを聞かない。
立て。
The leader kicked her with the heel of his boot.
手はそのままゆっくりとだ。少しでも余計な動きをしたら即座に人質を殺す。
When she stood up, her hands were handcuffed behind her back. They prodded her from behind to move next to the machine.
生体認証だな。
そうだ。ただし、私の静脈や指紋をコピーしても無駄だ。手を切り落としたり、目玉をくり抜いたって認証には使えない。2036年のシステムは そんなに間抜けじゃない。
The men in camo seemed aware of everything, she said. None of them seemed surprised or irritated.
教授はどうした？
The leader asked the man who was pointing the gun at Myri.
現在こちらに向かっているところです。
目標1は目標2とセットだ。洗脳しないと無理だと伝えろ。
Brainwashing, oh shit. Suzuha gritted her teeth when she heard the word brainwashing. She had seen many of her friends in Valkyrie undergo this cruel procedure, then be sent back as spies before turning into vegetables. The leader turned towards Suzuha.
洗脳の行き着く先は分かっているはずだ。教授は薬などは使わない。直接脳をいじられることになる。そうなる前に、素直に我々に協力した方が利口だと思うが。
教授か。
Where she'd come from, an old doctor with that name had led a brainwashing team that had attempted to destroy Valkyrie. Suzuha had hated him more than anyone else. They hadn't used drugs either. It was safe to assume both professors were the same person.
わかった。
She nodded.
言うことを聞く。だが、これじゃ無理だ。
Suzuha jangled the cuffs behind her back.
手錠は外す。ただし抵抗すれば、そっちの女が死ぬ。
There was still a gun pointed at Myri's head. Even if she tried to resist, it'd be impossible to save Myri from this many professional soldiers. When she went inside the cockpit, she used her biometrics to bypass the lock and brought up the control console. Lights came on all across the machine and she could hear a low rumbling.
よし降りろ。あとは我々が調査する。
あんたたちに理解できるとは思えないけどね。
As Suzuha left the cockpit, the leader turned his gaze toward a particular cluster of the men, which seemed to be engineers. That was the moment she was waiting for. Her hand had wandered below the console for just a moment when she left the cockpit. She'd hidden some knives there. Nice. Come on, Suzuha, come on. Without making a sound, she threw it at the leader. The knife pierced his throat. He went down so quickly he hadn't even had time to scream. She quickly readied another knife and darted between the men in camo. Her target was the man pointing a gun at Myri's head. Nice. God, she's badass. She dropped her hips low to the ground. In an instant, she moved behind him and slit his throat. Blood poured out onto an astonished Myri, but there was no time to worry about her. She grabbed his rifle and fired a few shots to force them to the ground, and grabbed Myri's hand and ran behind the machine. The plan had gone well so far, but she'd seriously underestimated how well trained these men were. The second-in-command quickly moved to the front and worked to reestablish control. All she had was a knife and the gun she'd stolen, and she needed to protect Myri, a non-combatant. She was still facing more than 25 active enemies. Whatever the right way to get out of this was, she couldn't find it. The time machine was still active. She couldn't escape because she couldn't leave it here. One of the men fired several rounds toward her, which bounced off the side of the machine. Oh, uh-oh. Oh no. Oh shit, did Myri just die? And then Myri's head flew back as if she'd been struck. A spurt of blood came out. No! Gosh, she just destined to die always? Ugh, her cute face was turning blood red. One of the rounds had grazed— okay, just grazed her. It grazed her after it had ricocheted. She was clutching herself with her arms, and her expression was completely blank. Her tiny body was shaking. Suzuha couldn't blame her. She fired back at the enemy, but they kept drawing closer. The time machine's maintenance hatch was right in front of her. When she saw that it was there, she visualized her last option in her mind. Oh shit. I was thinking maybe she was going to take Myri and just go back in time, but okay, that's also an option. If she did that, all her plans would be ruined. The path to Steins Gate would be forever closed. But that didn't mean she was cold-blooded enough to sacrifice Myri here. The world lines were going to converge. Maybe Myri wouldn't die here at all. But what her father had said during his video message bothered her.
もう気づいているかもしれないが、君とマユシの選択によって世界線はまた少し変動したんだ。つまり僕も君が出発した世界線とは違う別の世界線上の橋田至るということになる。
Which meant Suzuha had no proof that Mayuri would be alive in 2036 now. Had the world line really changed? Of course, for the sake of Operation Aquila, she hoped it had, but that meant she wouldn't be able to move from this place.
最悪の事態を想定しろ。
The worst case scenario, that would be these men taking the time machine. They could turn the world line into something even worse than the one Suzuha had experienced. It might become a world line where not only Mayuri's life wasn't safe, but Daru's wasn't either. If that was going to happen, she had to make her choice fast. She kept a careful eye on the men, and as soon as she saw an opening, she opened the maintenance hatch's biometric lock. She could see part of the engine, which was still giving off a quiet rumble. Oh god, is she actually gonna do it? She turned her gun sights on it. Fortunately, the unit that created the Kerr black hole still wasn't active. Even if she blew up the machine here, it probably wouldn't cause serious damage to the space-time continuum. As soon as she saw that, she went to pull the trigger. And Mayuri's voice stopped her.
止めるな。もう決めたことだ。
Mayuri had stopped her once before, and once again she hesitated for another instant. On the battlefield, that instant can decide your fate. She took a quick look around again, and she froze. And there's Kagari. Mixed in with the men in camo was a girl in a dark motorcycle suit and helmet. But I don't know if she's working with Dr. Leskinen, but maybe, like I said, maybe as soon as she sees Mayuri, she's gonna help us out. Maybe her and Suzuha will team up together to take these guys out.
あいつ、Kagari!
Was it Kagari who had leaked this place's location to them? She was well aware of Kagari's abilities after their 2 battles. If she wasn't completely in control of herself, she'd be killed instantly. She talked to herself.
私が生き残るのは諦めざるを得ないな。
How many would she have to take with her in order to give Mayuri a chance to escape? Right now, the only thing she could afford to think about was getting Mayuri back to Rintaro Okabe. But just when she'd made her decision, she felt Kagari staring at her. Or more precisely, the blood dripping down Mayuri's forehead. Yep, that's gonna be like the moment she's gonna be like, fuck these guys, I'm gonna protect mommy, right? That's her whole job, is to protect mommy. And just after that, Kagari did something she hadn't expected at all.
ママに何をした？お前たち、ママに何をした？
There was a scream. It was the howl of an enraged beast. And then the slaughter began. Fuck yes. Right? She's the one we want on our team. I'm a little sad we couldn't see that, like, in action, or at least a CG of that. That would have been badass. Kagari grabbed the second-in-command's head with her left hand. With her right, she steadied her rifle. After she fired, there was a very little left of his head. The rest of him dropped to the ground. She slammed the piece of tattered flesh that had once been a man's head into the ground, and with no warning at all, leapt from one screaming man to another. She fired her gun into every one of them. Hell yeah, there we go. Even when her targets were already soaked in a sea of blood, she kept firing until their limbs were blown apart into unrecognizable rags. Some of them tried shooting her to protect themselves, but no matter where she was struck, Kagari didn't even flinch. When her magazine ran dry, she drew forth long military-style cleavers. Holding one in each hand, she used them in her military combat training to slaughter anyone she saw. Their entrails were scattered all over the twilight rooftop, covering her whole body in blood and bits of flesh. And then Dr. Leskinen walks up all confident and sees that. Suzuha held Mayuri's head tight to her chest. Mayuri was shaking from fear, but did as she was told and clamped her hands down over her ears. Even so, she could still probably hear the sounds of ripping flesh and shattering bone. Even Suzuha had gone stone cold in shock. During her time in combat, she'd never seen a one-sided slaughter like this. She'd experienced this when they fought, but Kagari seemed to feel no fear or pain. She simply focused all her energy on killing her opponent. It was often said humans unconsciously avoided using all their muscle power to protect their own bodies, but Kagari seemed to lack that capability. Just now, she'd stabbed a man who turned to run from her in the back, then tossed his huge body to the ground with only a single arm. Then she kicked his stomach from below and ruptured his organs, killing him. Finally, after several, perhaps a dozen or more of the men had been killed, what remained of the squad started to scream orders at one another. With terrifying reflexes, she dodged between their shots and brutally murdered several more, but... At last, a hail of gunfire struck her left hand, and the knife she was holding fell to the ground. All right, Suzuha, this is when you come in. You clean up. You take care of the rest. No, that wasn't it. It wasn't the knife that fell. Oh god, it was her entire left hand. The shock caused her body to stagger back. Someone screamed in a voice that lacked any of the pride and bravery a soldier is supposed to possess. Damn, is Kagari about to die right now? Several more bullets dug into her body. Parts of the motorcycle suit ripped open and the helmet cracked. Blood that was clearly her own, not that of the men she'd killed, began to pour out. At last, she fell into a pile of corpses. Damn!
Yes!
They must have thought they finally had her. One of the survivors pointed his gun down to finish her, and just as he was about to pull the trigger, bitch, you thought. Her bestial roar and the man's terrified scream overlapped in a horrible cacophony. She forced herself to leap up and brought the back of the remaining cleaver down on his arm, knocking him back. An instant later, the knife slit his throat and ended his life. The survivors began to flee in terror. Damn, that was a lot. Oh god, Okabe's gonna come up and see this. Jesus.
But he's
gonna see Mayuri covered in blood and think that, like, the same thing happened again. When I reached the radio building, I realized that many people in the crowd of pedestrians were holding their phones up to the sky. There was evidently no service near the station either. I took a moment to catch my breath as I looked up at the radio building. I could hear what sounded like a distant explosion. It wasn't just one. The explosions were coming in a series. Several of the people around me were glancing at their surroundings, confused by these unfamiliar sounds. And then I realized that was gunfire. I remembered the sounds I'd heard during the battle between CERN's rounders and the Russian military. The sounds were coming from the roof of the radio building. Had I not made it in time? I ran into the radio building. For some reason, the elevator was under maintenance and turned off. I had no choice but to take the stairs. My heart was pounding so fast I thought it would burst, and I tripped several times due to how tense I was. I stumbled again and again on the stairs. How many times had I come up these stairs feeling like this? Cursing my lack of endurance, I headed for the top floor. When I got to the 7th floor, I ran into someone I'd hoped I wouldn't see. No, my guess that I'd run into them was right. I wished I wasn't, but... Dr. Leskinen, right? Yep.
Leskinen, 教授。
いやー、リンターロ。まさかこんなに早く君が来るとは思わなかったよ。
Dr. Leskinen seemed perturbed when he saw my face.
どうしてここに。
少し落ち着きなさい。そんなに息が切れていたのでは話もできないよ。
どうしてここにいるんです。アマデウスはどうなったんです。
君に頼んだサンプリングテストは半年前に終わっている。話すことはできないな。
I hope Dr. Leskinen is not going to kidnap Okabe and take him away before he gets a chance to see Mayuri. That was his answer. Even though Amadeus had disappeared, Leskinen was extremely calm. There was no sign of him trying to deal with the problem, and instead of being in his office, he was here. That was all I needed to know.
クリスが俺に送ってきたメッセージの内容は本当だったんですね。
The father that she'd spoken of was Leskinen after all.
クリスや魔法どうしたんです。彼女たちの記憶データを解析してタイムマシンに関するデータを取り出すつもりなんでしょう。
驚いたな。クリスはそこまで君に話してしまったのか。監視していたつもりだったが、いつの間にそんな真似を。
Leskinen seemed truly shocked, which meant he hadn't noticed that Kirisu was an at-channeler or that she'd spoken to me there. And then Leskinen took out a gun and pointed it at me. I wonder if this is when all the guys are going to run down the stairs fleeing and he's going to be like, what the fuck?
君は少し踏み込みすぎたようだ。
あなたは何者なんだ。
科学者だよ。だが、科学者も事前事業ではないのでね。君はストラテジックフォーカス社というアメリカの民間情報機関を知っているかな。
ストラテジックフォーカス社。アメリカのストラトフォーカ。
I'd read about them on a conspiracy theory website. I remembered reading that they'd acquired top secret information on Russian ballistic missiles that even the CIA couldn't get and then sold it. The result was the destruction of the CIA's reputation and at the same time, the total reorganization of Russia's military strategy. I'd even heard rumors that during the Gulf and Iraq wars, they'd obtained information about the warring countries faster than anyone, or warring, not warning, and spread it as needed.
世界から影の CIA などと呼ばれているのが私たちだよ。
So was he going to use Amadeus for military purposes? Was everything he'd said at the seminar just platitudes and lies?
まあ、私のことはどうでもいいだろう。それよりリンターロ、勝美から聞いたのだが、君も例の新型脳炎を発症しているそうだね。それどころか、新型脳炎そのもののメカニズムについて何か知っているらしいじゃないか。実に興味深い。君の持つその情報をぜひ提供してくれないか。簡単な施術を受けてくれるだけでいいんだ。そうすれば、私は君を助手として迎え入れてもいい。
For some reason, my whole body broke out in goosebumps at the word procedure. And Dr. Leskinen I knew, the man with a childlike, mischievous heart and deep scientific curiosity, the man who'd been so kind to me, the man I'd respected, was gone. In his place was the cruel scientific fundamentalist who thought nothing of human lives or hearts as he pointed a gun at me. Or was this who he truly was? Suddenly he seemed like a terrifying unknown.
どうかな?
He took a step towards me. And then... Another fierce gunfight broke out above. Skinnin clicked his tongue at the sound. He glanced towards the stairs. Nice, there you go. I took advantage of the distraction. Luckily, I was still on the staircase. I tackled his legs as hard as I could and he lost his balance and fell. He hit his head hard on one of the steps. I don't know why, but then he was just like, oh, it sounded like he just maybe like stubbed his toe a little bit. And after a moment's jerk, stopped moving at all. He might be dead, but I didn't care anymore. I'd become a murderer many times over already. What if he just was taken out that unceremoniously? He just fell and hit his head and just died. When I opened the door, what I saw was a vision from the heart of hell itself. There was blood everywhere, and bodies too. In the middle of the sea of blood was a girl in a motorcycle suit and helmet, covered in crimson as she lay on the ground. She held a giant cleaver. I could see instantly she was responsible for this disaster. Her shoulders moved up and down a little, so evidently she was still alive. I approached the woman, trying my best not to throw up from the stench.
大丈夫。ママ。
I could hear her voice from beneath the cracked, broken helmet. I looked closer and saw some of the blood was her own. Her body was racked by bullet wounds, and her left hand was completely gone. It was a miracle that she had somehow survived all that. She didn't seem to notice me as she slowly crawled through the blood. I followed her gaze and saw Mayuri huddled beneath the time machine. Suzuha seemed to be unhurt, but there was blood on Mayuri's face. I hadn't expected to see her here, and I was worried about her wounds, but more than anything, I was glad that she was safe. She raised her face when she heard my voice. But the next moment, her eyes locked onto the girl in the motorcycle suit. She saw the thing crawling toward her and screamed.
Mama! Mama! 違うの。これは、だって、かがりは、本当は人殺しなんてするつもりじゃなくって、ただ、ママを守ろうとして。
Kagari? Did she say Kagari? And it was only then I realized the girl in the motorcycle suit was the Kagari Shina that Suzuha had been looking for.
ごめんなさい、ママ。かがり、もういい。
Suzuha yelled, unable to take any more.
もういいから動くな。死ぬか。かがりはね、ママに怖い思いをさせようなんて思ってなかったんだよ。本当だよ。かがりはただママを助けなくちゃって。だからママお願い。かがりを嫌いにならないで。お願い。ママ。 ごめんなさい。許して。
At last, her strength failed and she collapsed. I returned to my senses and ran to her before Suzuha could get there. Her breathing was wheezy and shallow. One of the bullets had probably pierced her lungs. I thought taking off her helmet would help her breathe, so I put my hand on it to remove it, but she grabbed my hand and pushed it away.
やめて。取らないで。ママと鈴葉お姉ちゃんの前では。お願い。岡部さん。
Her voice and the way she talked. I realized who this girl called Kagari Shina was. I looked close and saw that I recognized her face. Wait, what? It's Suzuha? Oh, huh? Wait, what the... What?
おかりおじさん、かがりは?
Or, wait, that's... Is that... Hold on. Is that Yuki? Wait a second. What the fuck? What? What? It's funny too, because I was like, that first time where the girl you know, like in a motorcycle suit showed up, and then she got her arm hurt, and then like Yuki, she came back the next day and her arm was hurt, and I was like, fuck, it's Yuki. But huh, what? Either that's Suzuha from the future or that's Yuki. I'm so confused. I quickly motioned to Suzuha to keep her distance.
こっちは任せろ。お前は前よりを頼む。前よりの傷は大丈夫なのか。確認してくれ。
She looked upset, but did as I asked. I'm assuming that it's Yuki, that she doesn't want, you know, her daughter to see her like that. She went back to Mayuri and started to look at her wounds. Mayuri was covering her face and trying not to look at the bodies.
大丈夫。マユ姉さんの傷は深くない。
I relaxed a little when I heard that.
よかった。ママ。
Oh wait, it is?
無事だったんだ。
I was like, that doesn't look like Kagari at
よ
all.
かった。
I guess just because of the hair, right? Because her hair was dyed red? Kagari's voice was a whisper as I was so confused there for a second. I'm like, that looks like Yuki or like Suzuha. But then I'm like, but why would she be saying mommy? That threw me off so much with the hair not being red. I was like, what? Kagari's voice was a whisper as I cradled her in my arms. And then she slowly closed her eyes. Her breathing got weaker.
しっかりしろ。君はなんで。
大丈夫。心配しないで。私、こうなっても、痛くも苦しくもないから。いつも、神様の声が聞こえるの。君は痛くならないよ。苦しくならないよって。だから、全然。岡部さんには伝えておくね。本物は何も知らないです。
The real one doesn't know anything.
3年前からヨーロッパに留学中。
What?
だから。
Wait, like what? The real Kagari? Huh? What?
教授が私を秋葉原へ送り込むために裏で手を回して。本物は本当に何も知らない。
教授だっ
I'm
て。
so confused right now. What the hell? Did she
こ
mean...
の世界線では本当は来年なんですよ。
Shida and the real one will meet
Ashida-san
next
と
year.
本物が出会うのは。
Like what? The real Yuki? Kagari opened her eyes a little once and looked toward the time machine toward Mayuri and Suzuha.
大丈夫。
It is Yuki! It is
本物
Yuki!
も橋田さんのこと好
Okay.
きになります。
What the hell? Okay, so I was so thrown off there. I went through so many emotions. I'm like, that looks like Yuki. But it's saying it's Kagari. But they're talking about Yuki, the real Yuki, and about how... Okay.
私と同じように。
Okay. Okay, so yes, that explains why that Yuki in the previous timeline... So that was her in the motorcycle suit. Like... It all came back.
言っちゃった。誰にも内緒です。
It also explains why this Kagari and the other Kagari were so different. Like the real Kagari, personality-wise, was just so very different. And this time, her smile still shining in her eyes, they closed for real. With one final shudder, the strength left her body. Right? I guess it's true. Like, he would have no idea what Kagari actually looked like because he never met her in this timeline. Not the true her, anyway, the one who looked like Kirisu. Her life faded away in my hands. There was so much I wanted to ask her. Why had she appeared before us using that name? There were so many things I didn't understand. Same. But Kagari Shina's life ended in that moment.
おかりおじさん、かがりは無事？
So confusing. So confusing. Yeah, because like Kagari from when she was young had the red hair, right? This is not the real Yuki. I came back to my senses when I heard her voice. If I told her about Kagari's death, it would cause her a lot of mental stress. That wasn't a good idea. Right now, I needed to do something about the time machine as fast as possible. Okay. Alright. Suzuha, watch the rest of the video, please. I slung Kagari's body, bloody body around my shoulder and stood up. Yeah, should have known he wasn't going to be that easily killed. Before I could open the door, a huge shadow appeared from within. Should have finished him off. He should have finished him off. He wasn't dead, but he must have taken a lot of damage to the head because his face was the color of clay. One of his eyes wasn't focusing.
すぐにここは戦場になる。アメリカもロシアも日本も動き出してしまった。一度回り出した歯車はもう止められない。カガリがもっと早く我々に報告していれば、ここまで事態は悪化することもなかったものを。
Leskinen knew about Kagari, which meant I was right. But Suzuha spoke before I could.
そうか。お前が教授か。かがりを洗脳したのはお前だな。
そうなんですか。あなたはそういう人だったんですか。
別にこの私が何かしたわけじゃない。
Leskinen didn't try to deny it.
むしろ10年ほど前、路頭に迷っていた彼女を助けて、ここまで育つよう援助してあげたんだよ。
援助って、普通に生活してたら、彼女がこんな風になるはずないじゃないか。
そんなに怒鳴らないでくれないか。頭が割れそうにいたもんだ。嘘じゃない。彼女は自分の方から私に接触してきた。整形までして、この町に潜り込んだのも彼女のプランだよ。
Oh shit. Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm so all over the place with this. So she got the plastic surgery to look like the girl that we know as Yuki.
何でも頭の中の神様がすべて教えてくれるんだそうだ。
So yeah, I guess like in the world where Kagari, she didn't get to that point, right? She managed to escape, and then she met up, like she got found by, except no, she was older at that point. I was thinking about like when she was a kid, but no, she was in her 20s when she got found at the temple. So I'm wondering if like that's the diversion, or the divergence is like whether she stayed, got the surgery, and then ended up, I'm so confused, and then ended up becoming a killer, or when she was found at the temple, she escaped, and then she got with us, and she never turned into a killer, I guess?
最初、私はホームレスの子供が食べ物欲しさにくだらない作り話をしているんだと思ったんだがね。彼女の脳や記憶を調べてみると、非常に興味深く素晴らしいことが分かった。その神様というのはね。
And even as his face twisted in pain, he smiled proudly.
その神様というのは、
Oh, it was him?
なんと未来の
What? I thought it was Okabe.
2036年の私だったんだよ。
No, when he talked about protecting his mom and like that's what she was put there for. I thought that was Okabe who did that.
あんたは本当のマッドサイエンティストだ。
Suddenly, I heard a siren down below. Just hearing the sound made me feel uneasy. I'd never heard a sound like it before.
なんだこれ。
ゲリラ攻撃情報、ゲリラ攻撃情報。当地域にゲリラ攻撃の可能性があります。屋内に避難し、テレビ、ラジオをつけてください。
I heard that announcement coming from the speakers on the street. Yeah, that is very unnerving. Guerrilla attack information, one type of instantaneous national alert system. In case of an emergency like a large-scale disaster or armed attack, the J-Alert system uses communication satellites to automatically activate all disaster warning systems in the country and warn the populace. When activated, the J-Alert triggers a series of loudspeakers and sirens placed all around the country. There are several different types, such as an emergency earthquake alert, Tokai earthquake alert, tsunami alert, eruption alert, weather alert, ballistic missile alert, air raid alert, guerrilla and special forces attack alerts, and a terrorism alert. A guerrilla attack? I could hear several helicopters in the sky above me. Their engines were clearly more powerful than the ones in the media's news choppers. I recognized the sounds from the time I'd spent in the wartime worldline.
言っただろう。ここは間もなくタイムマシンを奪い合う戦場と化すんだ。
第三次世界大戦が始まるのか。
まさかこの町の住民も自分たちの都市の中心から世界戦争が始まるとは夢にも思っていないだろうね。
And then Luskin leaned up against a wall, sat down, and stopped moving. Whether he'd passed out or gone into a coma from the brain damage, I didn't have time to find out. It was like the air in the city had gotten heavier. That's how it felt. A chill ran down my spine. I'd spent a month at war in that worldline, and the same future was about to begin here. Something like that couldn't happen in Japan. It was like a TV show or a movie. But I knew instinctively that this wasn't fiction. There had been signs since 6 months ago, here in Akihabara, in Tokyo, in Japan. Spies and soldiers from all around the world had been working in the shadows. So I'd known this would happen. By refusing Suzuha's request and choosing the world line where Mayuri survived, I doomed over 5 billion people. I was the one who chose this. It was me. I looked up and saw Suzuha was pushing Mayuri into the time machine.
こうなったら私たちはこのまま過去へジャンプする。かがりのことを頼んだよ。
Suzuha had no idea that Kagari was already dead. She leapt into the cockpit. I raced over and grabbed onto the hatch, then looked inside.
過去ってまさか1年前あの日へ行くのか。こんな急に。
急ってわけじゃないんだ。それにあの日へは飛ばない。
She was tapping commands into the console as she spoke.
何？あの日へは飛ばないってどういう。
ちょっとまゆ姉さんを借りるよ。
Mayuri was already strapped into a seat, just like I was when I jumped a year ago with Suzuha.
マユリ、お前。
あかり。
I heard fierce gunfire and screams in the distance. It looked like some of the spies had started fighting each other. Kagari may have wiped out a force from one nation, but an army from an entirely different one was still coming. Ah, her message! Mayuri handed me her smartphone. I took it without thinking. It's probably gonna be something about how, like, he's her Hikaboshi.
ちょっと待て。なんでお前が行くんだ。お前が行ったって結果は同じだ。何もできない。それに今飛んだら戻ってこられない。違うの。
オカリンじゃダメなの。これはね、マユシーの役目だから。
わからない。俺にはさっぱりわからない。頼む、降りてくれマユリ。お前まで因果の輪から外れたら、俺は何のためにこの世界線を選んだのか。
オカリン。
Mayuri gently rubbed my cheek, and she smiled sadly. She softly pushed my shoulder. It threw me off balance and made me let go of the hatch. And the hatch closed. It was too late. By the time I'd grabbed back on, the hatch was sealed shut. The door control was biometric. Only Susaha could open it now. The time machine started to roar. A pale light began to gather around it. I'd seen this before in the Alpha worldline. Just then, a group of armed men kicked open the door and swarmed onto the roof. They were highly trained military operatives. Okay, so just as they're probably about to try and stop the time machine, that should bring us back to where Mayuri wants to go, right? She says she has to fix things. So that means all of this is just we're gonna get out of this timeline. And then an attack helicopter descended from the skies. The soldiers started to shoot at it, but the helicopter seemed to ignore them as it slowly hovered in place. I realized the powerful rocket launchers on either side of its body were aimed at me. No, at the time machine. It couldn't be. But my worst fears were realized. Hopefully it disappears just as it's about to get blown up. The helicopter fired its rockets. They headed straight for the time machine. It was still there, shrouded in light. Oh no! No, no, no! That didn't happen. Come on. The second I yelled, a powerful blast blew me back. The next thing I knew, I was crawling on the ground. I saw that some of the soldiers had already joined the mountain of corpses on the ground, and some of them were still shooting at the helicopter. I stood up as fast as I could. My whole body felt like it was on fire. My skin was burnt in places. My clothes had been blasted off. My own problems didn't matter. What about the time machine? I looked up toward where the time machine had been. If it had jumped in time, it should have been able to avoid the rockets. Oh, but... There were scraps of metal everywhere. I could tell they belonged to the time machine. Had I not made it in time?
Susaha. Mayuri.
I looked around in the cloud of smoke.
Mayuri. Doko da? Mayuri! Susaha! Henji o shite kure!
There were bodies everywhere, but I couldn't see Mayuri or Susaha. I couldn't even tell if they were alive or dead. There was no bodies. It simply vanished. After that, things went far beyond my power to control. Brutal battles took place on the ground and in the sky of Akihabara. I'd seen footage of war in the Middle East on the news. Those same scenes were playing out in Akihabara. I managed to slip through the chaos of the battle and barely escaped the radio building with my life. I had no choice but to leave Kagari's body. I took the long way back to the lab so no one would find me. By the time I arrived, the sun had set and the night sky was illuminated with explosions and tracer rounds. The whole of Akihabara was like someone had poked a beehive. Lights were out at the lab, but inside I found Daru, Maho, and Ferris staring at the TV and computer monitor.
Okarin!
Okabe-san, よく無事で。ってひどい怪我してる。大丈夫なの？
戦闘に巻き込まれたん？
急いで手当てしないと。
I didn't have the energy to answer them. I looked toward the footage on the TV screen. The reporter was wearing a bulletproof vest and hard hat. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, trying to drown out the reporters from the other stations.
まるで戦争です。秋葉原駅前や中央通りはすでに閉鎖されて、米軍と自衛隊のヘリや装甲車が。今またものすごい発砲音が聞こえました。ここは本当に日本なのでしょうか。まるで内戦中の国の取材をしているようです。政府の発表ではテロということですが、こんな。
And then a stray shot from an anti-material rifle fired by a special forces team from some county or another struck the news van's engine and blew it up.
爆発した。爆発が起きました。死にたいのか。今すぐ逃げろ。 もう戦争なんだ。本当に死ぬぞ。
An SDF soldier forced his way into the screen and yelled at the media to run away.
戦争ってどことですか。知るか。
Just after that, I heard another explosion and the video was cut off. Did they take a direct hit? Everyone fell silent.
ここも危ないわね。お家には帰れない。
ネットの情報も大混乱中なんだよ。なあオカリン、鈴葉は、あとマユシは見つかったん？
鈴葉とマユリは、鈴葉とマユリは過去へ飛んだのか、死んだのか、どっちかだ。
Daru stormed up to me
どう
infuriated.
いうことだよ。もっとちゃんと教えてくれ。
戦闘ヘリがタイムマシンにロケットランチャーを。タイムマシンは破壊されて、それに鈴葉とマユリが乗ってて、過去へ飛ぶ直前だったんだ。マシンの残骸は残ってたけど、全部じゃなくて、ラル、どれだけ探しても鈴葉もマユリも死体が見つからなかったんだ。体の一部さえ残ってなかった。まるで跡形もなく消えたみたいに。あの二人ちゃんと過去に飛べたのかな。
The tears I tried so hard to hold back came pouring out. Daru fell to his knees. Ferris and Maho were staring at me, eyes wide in shock. The worst part is the not knowing. I was hoping that, like, we would get taken back in time. The timeline changed because they went back, but it's still going. I guess we're just stuck in this timeline. Daru slammed his fist into the floor. Maybe this doesn't feel like this doesn't feel like we're getting closer to the end. This feels like we failed. I tried to wipe away my tears and realized I was holding something in my right hand. The phone! Read the phone! Read the message! It was the cell phone that Mayuri had given me. She told me to read the message on it. It wasn't locked. I opened the mail folder. There were several unsent messages addressed to her friends and family. One of them was addressed to me. Was this what she wanted me to read? With shaking fingers, I tapped the screen to open the message. Aww.
オカリンへ。トゥットゥルー。マユシーです。本当はちゃんとお話ししようと思ったけど、うまく言えるかどうかわからないし、オカリンに引き止められると迷っちゃいそうだからメールにしました。私はすずさんと一緒に過去へ行ってきます。なんでってオカリンは怒るかもしれないね。でもこれは私がやらなきゃいけないことなの。だってあの時私の彦星様を、どんなに苦しい時でもいつも立ち上がって高笑いをあげてた強い強い彦星様を暗い雲の向こうに隠しちゃったのは私なんだから。私ね、勘違いしてた。みんなは未来をオカリン一人に押し付けようなんてしてなかったんだね。オカリンの周りにはダルくんがいて、すずさんもいて、 デカ君もいて、フェリスちゃんもいて、ユキさんもいて、それにマホさんも加わった。だから今度はね、私の出番。だってこれはラボメンナンバー002の初めての大きな任務なんだから。オカリンはきっと心配すると思うけど大丈夫だよ。それにもしも何かあったとしても必ず助けに来てくれるって信じてるから。私の大好きな法院京馬が新しく作ったタイムマシンに乗って必ず。だから私は行ってきます。必ず戻ります。オカリンのところへ戻ってきます。少しだけ私は法院京馬のことが好き。でもね、岡部倫太郎のことはもっと好きだよ。
Oh, that's cute. Where before she said that she loved Kiyoma more.
お前忘れてるだろ。お前は俺の人質なんだぞ。
Aw.
いなくなったら人質にならないじゃないか。何かあったら助けに来いだと。人質のくせに生意気だろ。狂気のマッドサイエンティストがお前なんかのために。お前なんかのために。お前はバカだ。でももっとバカだったのはこの俺だ。
My heart was in pain. It hurt so much. It was just like after I'd killed Kirisu. Maybe I'd be better off if I just fell over and died. I'd do anything to be released from this pain. But in the corner of my tear-blurred vision, I saw it. Kyoma Hyoyen's final weapon, his last hope. No, it was the thing that had brought me so many nightmares. I staggered to the development room and threw off the cardboard that was covering it. There it was. The phone wave, name subject to change, Unit 2. The thing that Maho and Daru had been working on behind my back. I could complete this. This is the moment. This is what's going to convince him to go back in time. Because now he's in a timeline where he doesn't have Mayuri or Kirisu. I turned around, wiped away my tears, and saw my friends looking depressed in the middle of the darkened room. Come on, Hoya and Kyoma, you gotta come back.
タイムリープマシンの作り方がわからないと言ったな。俺の言う通りにしてくれるか。クリスの導き出した回をお前たちに伝える。それでタイムリープマシンは起動する。
Maho said the one thing she didn't know was how to compress the memory data, which means that everything else was finished, and I knew how to complete it. Daru was the first to nod.
僕やるよ。教えてくれオカリン。
私も手伝うわ。
決まりだにゃ。
All three responded with no hesitation. They turned toward me and spoke their answers clearly.
よし。ダル、セルンにハッキングをかけてくれ。LHC を遠隔操作する。そこで記憶データを36バイトまで小さくする。それなら過去へ転送できる。
たったの36バイト。
You could tell she was a scientist by the way her face went pale at the number.
けどさ、なんか動作が不安定で、こいつただの電子レンジになっちゃう時があって。
ブラウン管工房の42型ブラウン管。 それが点灯している時に電話レンジカッコ仮は機能を発揮する。
ブラウン管。あ、そうか。
Just the words CRT were enough for her to figure it out. The life was coming back to their eyes.
それなら完成させられるかも。でも完成したとしていきなり使うつもり？何の実証もせずに人体実験まがいのことをするなんて。
自分の作ったものに自信が持てないのか。
でも
別の世界線でクリスはやってみせたぞ。
それはクリスだからよ。私はあの子にはなれないわ。
アットチャンネルに書かれたクリスのメッセージを見ただろう。
I didn't see the very end. Show that again. The thing that was directed at Maho. I didn't get to read it. Yes, there we go. I always regarded myself as... Okay, lastly, I'd like you to pass a message to the person I respect the most. I always regarded myself as an essentially ordinary intellect, and you were always the person I wanted to be. You were the real Amadeus.
クリスにあそこまで言わせたんだ。なのに逃げる気か。
逃げたりなんかしないわよ。見くびらないで。
I nodded back and smoothed back my hair, which had been mussed by the explosion.
京馬、こ
Ferris brought me my white lab coat, which had been hanging for ages on the wall in the development room. Also, might be a bad time to bring it up, but didn't he say that all his clothes got exploded, disintegrated? So he's pretty much naked. Am I misremembering that? I bit down on my lip and wiped away the tears one more time. There we go. I took the lab coat and slipped my arms through the sleeves. Spun around so the hem of the coat flew up, and stood triumphantly in the center of the lab, just as I used to. And then I declared in a loud voice,
これより電話レンジカッコ仮2号機を完成させタイムリープを行う。俺に力を貸してくれ。今度こそ俺は絶対に諦めない。
I looked at Daru, Ferris, and finally at Maho.
たとえ何回何十回何百回ダメだったとしても、何千回何万回何億回と挑んで何もかも全て救ってみせる。鈴葉もマユリも、そしてクリスもだ。これはその最初の一歩となる。
For the first time in a year, I was back to my old self. My friends saw me and nodded, their faces filled with resolve. Shoutouts to my top-tier patrons: Salieri, Revealing Storm, Amlife, Icognito, Saturn Sins, Doublis91, Harry Gazip, Kenju Storm, and Lynn's VA.